Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are opening up the vault on the Renaissance, but we're not focusing on the usual suspects, not the painters, not the sculptors. We're looking at the deep pockets that made all the magic happen. We are talking about the Renaissance merchants, these commercial titans who took just mountains of wealth and transformed them into centuries of wonder. They truly wielded brushes they never held. And our premise for this deep dive is, it's fascinating. You have these powerful figures, in many ways the first modern oligarchs, and they just completely redefined the purpose of staggering wealth. They weren't just consumers of culture, they became its custodians. Deliberately. So our mission today is to really understand how their commercial imagination became a new kind of currency, a currency for identity, a reputation written not in ledgers but in pigment and stone.
And it's so important to establish that the term merchant here, it's huge. These weren't just shopkeepers. We're talking about financiers, bankers on an international scale, people controlling these incredibly powerful textile guilds. But they learned a crucial lesson, especially in a volatile place like Soren's. Wealth without a visible cultural footprint was empty, and honestly, it was politically dangerous.
So the patronage wasn't about charity, it was more strategic, an investment in civilization itself.
Exactly. They saw that sustained artistic support could cement their family name, and crucially, it could act as a kind of political shield. The Medici are, of course, the perfect case study here. Their banking practices, they sometimes got very close to the line on usury, so they needed a powerful counter-narrative, a story of civic virtue.
That's a great point. So how did they build that counter-narrative?
Well, they invested in skills in the long term. Cosimo de' Medici didn't just go out and buy a finished statue. He funded entire ecosystems. He set up workshops where young apprentices could learn directly from masters. We're talking Donatello, Fra Angelico, and his grandson, Lorenzo the Magnificent. He famously continued that. So this wasn't just about acquiring art. It was about making sure that the skills from, fresco chemistry to bronze casting were passed down. It ensured Florentine art didn't just survive, it excelled.
Okay, let's unpack that, because if the wealth gave them power, their patronage gave them permanence. So let's get into this core idea. Art as a declaration. Not just decoration. It's an instrument for building an identity, a public statement of legitimacy.
It was the most powerful PR tool in the Renaissance world. Look at Cosimo de' Medici's commission of Benozzo Gozzoli's Procession of the Magi. It's for the family chapel. So on the surface, okay, it's a religious fresco, but it's so incredibly self-serving. Gozzoli actually painted portraits of the Medici family right into the scene. They're riding alongside the biblical kings.
Wait, so they're literally inserting themselves into sacred history?
Precisely. It creates this visual declaration of legitimacy, of status. It positions the family as well as divinely chosen figures, and that's a claim that's going to outlast any business rival. It was a masterpiece of social climbing, painted right onto their walls.
And this patronage, it wasn't just about status. It pushed the artists themselves into new territory. It fueled innovation. I'm thinking of Botticelli's Primavera, commissioned by another Medici, right? But this isn't a biblical scene. It's mythology.
And that shift is absolutely key. The move from, saints and scripture to classical myth, it shows something else. It shows the patron's intellectual ambition, their commitment to these new humanist values that were just sweeping through Florence. Humanism was all about rediscovering classical learning, focusing on human potential, on reason. So by commissioning these complex classical themes, the patron was signaling, I'm not just rich, I'm educated, I'm part of the future.
So the art had to be as sophisticated as the patron wanted to appear.
It had to be. And that exchange, that's the engine of the Renaissance. The greatest cultural statements came from collaboration, sometimes from tension. Think about Pope Julius II and Michelangelo with the Sistine Chapel ceiling. That work evolved through intense negotiation between the patron's vision and the artist's, frankly, defiant genius. And it's that interplay, that friction between massive resources and a restless imagination that created these transcendent works.
Right, so if the ideas were the message, the materials themselves were the volume control. Let's move into that, into the chromatic splendor.
Yeah.
The idea that color itself was a language of power.
Oh, absolutely. If you could afford it, color was power. The merchants knew that every single element of a commission spoke volumes. And color was often the loudest element. Patrons would strategically pick pigments to broadcast their wealth and, just as important, their global reach.
And the ultimate status symbol, the single most extravagant material. That was
that ultramarine blue, that deep, intense, almost celestial blue. And get this, is a stunning fact. Ultramarine was made from crushed lapis lazuli, a semi-precious stone that could only be imported from one place in the world.
Afghanistan.
The mines high in the mountains of Afghanistan. And because of the insane difficulty in mining it, transporting it, processing it, the pure pigment cost more than gold by weight.
Hold on. So if I'm looking at a painting, the blue in, say, the Virgin Mary's robe, that area is effectively a receipt for more cash than the same area painted in gold leaf.
It is a receipt. It's a promissory note. It's a declaration of commercial dominance all in one. When a merchant funded a painting that was saturated in ultramarine, he wasn't just picking a nice color. He was broadcasting his vast international trade connections, his reliable supply chain, and his unbelievable financial stability. It was proof.
That completely recontextualizes how you look at these paintings. It's not just blue, it's the logistics of getting a rock from Asia to Italy.
Precisely. And it went beyond blue. You have rich vermilions, which required complex chemistry, deep greens from malachite, and of course, brilliant gold leaf. These materials created a visual story of social ascent that you just could not ignore.
And they were orchestrating this, right? It wasn't just random spending.
Not at all. They were creating complete aesthetic environments. Take the Palazzo Medici Riccardi. The color schemes, the marble choices, the architectural details, all of it was carefully calibrated. The goal was to create this atmosphere of refined sophistication, something that visually separated the new merchant elite from the old, sometimes cruder, nobility. They built a kind of visual barrier of beauty, showing their status came from taste, not just money. And they'd put the most expensive pigments in the most visible areas to maximize the impact.
So we've seen how they used paint. Let's shift our gaze a bit bigger. To the architecture. How do they translate these ideals into tangible, city-shaping forms?
This is really where commercial pragmatism meets artistic ambition. And it fundamentally changed the look and feel of their cities. The Medici funding Filippo Brunelleschi's dome for the Florence Cathedral. I mean, that's the ultimate example. It's financial power enabling revolutionary engineering.
It's still an engineering marvel today.
It is, but you have to understand the technical challenge. When Brunelleschi proposed it, the technology to build the scaffolding, the centering, to hold it up during construction just didn't exist. It was impossible. It required truly revolutionary thinking. That merchant wealth, it funded years of experimentation. It funded risk-taking. It allowed Brunelleschi to invent a self-supporting, double-shell dome that both honored Gothic traditions and pioneered something totally new. It was a huge financial gamble that created permanence.
That's the difference right there. Funding art versus funding an intellectual breakthrough.
Exactly. And the philosophy runs just as deep. Look at Giovanni Rucellai. He commissions Leon Battista Alberti for the Palazzo Rucellai. Now, Alberti used classical Roman elements, sure, but the real statement was in the math, the mathematical precision of the design. The facade's proportions weren't just about looking nice. They embodied Neoplatonic philosophy.
Okay, unpack that for us. Why put philosophy on the front of your house?
Well, Neoplatonism was this idea that mathematical harmony reflected a perfect, ideal world that existed behind our chaotic earthly reality. So by designing his home with this severe intellectual order, Rucellai was showing the old land-owning nobles that his new money was matched by deep intellectual and philosophical cred. He wasn't just a rich upstart, he was an intellectual leader.
So the building itself becomes an argument for your social worth.
Absolutely. And this need to balance things was everywhere. You see it in Venice, with the merchant elite funding the Scuola Grande di San Marco. They had to integrate that clean Renaissance symmetry with the rich Byzantine decoration that just is Venice. Lasting influence meant you had to integrate modern philosophy while respecting and investing in your regional traditions.
Okay, that covers the city, the palaces. Let's bring it down to the individual, to the body itself. Because this investment in visual culture, it didn't stop at the walls. The body was a canvas, a critical one.
Clothing was an incredibly powerful medium, especially for this rising commercial class. For generations, you had sumptuary laws restricting who could wear what, who could wear silk or fur or certain colors. They were designed to keep the nobility looking distinct. But as merchants got richer, they started to push back, to find creative ways around these laws. Their clothes became deliberate statements.
They were dressing for the job they wanted on a societal scale.
That's a perfect way to put it. And we have this phenomenal piece of documentation that gives us this unique insight. A man named Matthias Schwartz, the chief accountant for the Fugger banking dynasty, an absolute giant of a firm, he created this document, his Tracton book, or Book of Clothes.
That sounds amazing. What was it exactly?
It's extraordinary. It's an illuminated manuscript. It have 137 images of Schwartz throughout his life, starting from when he was a baby. And it meticulously records his fabric choices, his color combinations, the fashion trends, all over 4 decades.
Yeah.
It's not just a fashion diary. It's a visual autobiography of a rising professional who wasn't born a noble.
So he's applying the same obsessive detail he used on the Fugger's financial ledgers to his own outfits.
And that's the key insight. It shows the strategic self-presentation of this new class. He links specific, often very opulent garments to major life events, a promotion, his wedding, a big business deal. He was building a visual narrative of success and refinement. It was just as carefully managed as any altarpiece he might have commissioned. It affirmed that identity was a masterpiece built of silk and wool, just as much as pigment and stone.
It makes perfect sense. If you're building your legacy in marble, you have to construct your personal identity with the finest textiles, too. Okay, finally, let's talk about the engine behind all of this. The artist-patron relationship. Was this just a transaction, here's the money, give me the art? Or was it deeper?
Oh, it was a complex, delicate partnership. A true collaboration at its best. The smartest merchants understood they weren't buying a commodity. They were investing in genius. They give specific instructions, of course, about themes, celebrate the family, show our piety. But the most effective patrons knew that micromanagement would kill the very brilliance they were paying for.
So you have this tension, a balance between the patron's mandate and the artist's need for creative freedom.
You do. And there were constant arguments over money, over timelines, over themes. But the successful partnerships created what you could call a cultural alchemy. The merchants provided the resources, the social context. The artists brought the technical skill, the innovative vision. Think of Botticelli and the Vespucci family. The patron outlines the general idea, but they trusted Botticelli's expertise on how to actually compose it, on the color theory, on how to deliver it.
And this continuous collaboration, it actually created lasting institutions of knowledge.
It did. The commitment to heritage required sustained investment in infrastructure. The Medici workshops, they were true living repositories of knowledge. They were training grounds. They ensured that specialized skills, like how to properly apply fresco or cast in bronze, weren't lost. They were refined by each new generation.
And other families did the same, cementing these regional styles through craft.
Precisely. The Strozzi family's palazzo, with that incredible stonework by Benedetto da Maiano. That construction site became a hands-on training ground. That's how regional artistic identity gets defined, through these multi-year collaborations between the merchant, the architect, and the master craftsman. You see it in Venice, too. The Scuola Grande di San Rocco commissioned Tintoretto for a cycle of paintings over 23 years. That ensures not just a masterpiece, but a methodical, documented transfer of his unique techniques to his assistants and apprentices. So when you put it all together, what's the synthesis? Renaissance merchants were. Yeah, they were cultural guardians. They were individuals who understood that sheer wealth on its own just creates temporary monuments. But vision, when it's paired with resources, that builds civilizations. Their strategic support wove their family identity, their ambitions, into the very fabric of European culture.
And their legacy it's everywhere you look. It's in the engineering audacity of Brunelleschi's dome. It's in that impossible blue in a Botticelli painting. These merchants didn't just hire artists. They started this profound, multi-generational conversation between commerce, power, and beauty. And their story is a reminder for you, I think, that true wealth isn't what you hoard. It's what you leave behind for others to experience, to interpret, and to reimagine.
And that encourages you to look beyond just the individual masterpiece, to see the larger connected narratives that shape our cultural heritage. The ultimate lesson from these merchants is the enduring power of investing in beauty and innovation, even today. It makes you ask yourself, what civilization are you funding with your own resources?